Hi, I'm Christopher, a research software engineer with Research Software Workshops, and it's a very warm welcome to Introduction to Data Analysis in R, Part 1. The link to the course material is at the bottom, and that will bring you to a web page that will look something like this. Now we're going to be using RStudio, and hopefully you've been able to install that from one of our earlier workshops, and so we also need you to start an RStudio session, which will look something like this as well. Now this course is aimed at the intermediate R developer who wants to learn how to do useful data analysis tasks in R. It will focus on modern R, specifically using the tidyverse collection of packages which are designed for data science. Now, data analysis is a huge topic, and we could not possibly cover it all in one short workshop. The purpose of this workshop is to give you an introduction to some of the most useful tools and to demonstrate some of the most common problems that will surface. Now, this workshop will assume that you have knowledge of R equivalent to that covered in our beginning R and intermediate R workshops. The links to those are in the web page here, and please do feel free to go and look at that material if you haven't seen it before. Now this workshop will provide the background necessary to follow our later applied data analysis in our workshop, which is also linked here. Now this workshop is online at all times, and you are free to jump ahead to any of the chapters that are linked. Now as I said, for the purposes of this workshop we will be using RStudio. If you haven't installed and got RStudio working, then please follow the instructions in the intermediate R workshop to get it up and running. Now in previous workshops, we've used the RScript command line program to execute scripts, and also the RStudio console to run R interactively. Now in this workshop, we're going to use another tool, which is called R Notebooks, or R Markdown Notebooks, to run your R code. Now this operates like a standard RStudio console interactive session, but there's the addition of allowing you to intersperse your code with blocks of text to explain what you're doing, and then embed outputs such as graphs directly into that page. Now to get started, what we're going to do is we launch RStudio as you have here, and then what I want you to do is I want you to go to File, and then go to New File, and now we're going to choose R Notebook. And this is going to open a new R Notebook, which hopefully you'll get something that will look something like this. Now the R Notebook starts up initially untitled, so we're going to have to give it a name by saving it. So we can click on the save icon, or you can do Control or Command S to save. So in this case, I'm going to click on the save icon. It's going to say, what do I want to save it as? And I'm going to call this Hello. And then the file extension we use for R Notebooks is RMD, which is short for R Markdown, or R Markdown Notebook. So if I click Save now, we've now saved the file, and it will pop up, in this case, into my home directory. Now, when the notebook is launched, you'll see a lot of example text trying to explain how it works, and this can be very, very useful. But in this case, we're just going to clear all of this because I'm going to sort of give you everything from the beginning. So if we clear everything like this, we're now set up with just the top as it was loaded. Now, an R Markdown notebook is just a text file, and it's a text file in which we write text formatted using Markdown. Markdown is a simple markup language which lets you write rich documents. Indeed, Markdown is used for lots of things now outside of our Markdown notebooks, including web pages and help documentation and other things. So it's a very wide thing, and we have a link in the notes if you want to learn about Markdown. Now you can add R code to this file by placing R into R code blocks. Now we can do this by typing, if we put a little line here, if we go in and we do Insert, and then R. And you can see what's happened now is it has placed into the text these three backticks, open curly bracket, R, close curly bracket. And indeed, if you wanted to, we could have typed this ourselves instead of going in Insert R. It's completely your choice. Now within these pairs of triple backticks, you can write R code. So for example, if I type in here now, cat hello R exclamation mark with, remember, \n as a new line, that is now a bit of R code. And notice here we can see a little play icon which says run current chunk, and if I click on this, it will now run the R and then place the output directly below where the code is within this R Markdown notebook. This is pretty cool. Now we can also write general text. For example, I can write normal text, so here this is some text. So that's not R, it's just some interesting text which maybe we'll use to add some context or some background about what this notebook contains. And you can also do things like add in headings. So this is a heading. Now it will render when we try and render this in sort of another format. So this means we're going to have some headings. We can also add other R blocks. Now, as I said, we can do this by writing the little backticks directly. So if I do 3 backticks, curly bracket R, I can then write into here maybe A is set equal to 5, B is assigned from 7, and then we're going to do A plus B, and then I'm going to close those 3 backticks. And you can see here we have green triangle now. We can now run this R code. And you can see there we are, we have 5 plus 7, which is 12 written down. Now, the R blocks in this R notebook are linked together, and that means that things you define in one little block of R within your notebook are available for later blocks. So for example here, I'm going to create another block, a little bit of text explaining what I'm doing. I'm now going to create another block here. 3 backticks, curly bracket R, and if I now type here A minus B, now when I play, this will actually fetch the value of A we defined earlier and the value of B we defined earlier, and so it will run and it will print out -2. Now, this is very cool. One thing to be careful of is if I now change this higher block up here, so I maybe change A to 50 and then rerun, that's changed this cell, but I'd have to rerun this cell afterwards to update the output that comes from here. So please do be careful. Try to run the cells in order as we go down the notebook. Now, most R functions produce outputs that will look really nice in an R notebook. So for example, a tibble will format nicely, while a graph, which we'll introduce later, will render in place. So let's create another R block. So we're going to do 3 backticks and R, and then we're going to type library tidyverse to load up the tidyverse. And now we're going to sort of make a tibble of the cars dataset, and this is a dataset which comes directly from within the tidyverse. So this is loading, we can see it was then running, and now when it's completed, here we can see a tibble rendered nicely of the cars dataset, which is kind of quite cool as well. Now we can do the same thing with graphs. So, and I'll explain how graphs will work later in the workshop, but if we type plot and then the cars dataset, and then we run that, there we are, it's now created a graph of that tibble, plotted out speed versus distance. No idea what this data is, we don't have to worry about that now. And you can see the graph is rendered in line within this notebook, which is kind of, again, very cool. Now this document can be rendered, so as I said, that little heading where we did the hash, it will be rendered into a heading, and we can render this notebook to a nice web page, a good looking PDF, or even a Word file, and we can do that by clicking the preview button here. So I preview notebook as maybe knit to PDF. It will then run, and then it will create a PDF file eventually. Take a little bit of time. Here we are, hello.pdf has been created, and then if I have a little click on that and have a look, there we are, we've now rendered this notebook to a PDF file. Again, I think that's very cool. I'm going to close the console that popped up at the bottom. There we are. Now, as I said, you can knit to notebooks, HTML, PDFs, Word documents. Indeed, there are packages which enable you to knit as well to PowerPoint presentations, etc. So this R Markdown Notebook is a really good kind of format that enables you to mix together your documentation, your R code, your outputs, your visualizations, and then render to something which can then be shared with others. And indeed, it's becoming common for people to use R notebooks as a sort of lab notebook where they document their processes, intersperse with the code, and then sort of share them as a reproducible sort of research output. Now, this style of working where you give prose and code equal weight is sometimes called literate programming, and it's a really good way for helping people understand exactly what your scripts are doing and sort of make reproducible graphs that are easy for other people to work with. So this has now brought us on to the exercise. So I've taken you all the way through this page. Please feel free to reread this if you want to. And what we've now got to is an exercise at the bottom, which is here. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to take the code, which is written here as a solid block of R, and I would like you to create an R notebook where you will break down this code chunk by chunk and intersperse it with documentation explaining exactly what each part of this code does. Now, press pause now, and that will enable you to do the work, and when you unpause, I will show you the answer. Okay, so you've unpaused now, so I'm going to assume you're ready for me to have a sort of show you the answer. So let's have a go. So I'm going to basically close this hello notebook because we're going to create a new one. So I'm going to go File, New File, and then R notebook. Clear this out because we don't need it. And then I'm going to save this as, this looks like a shopping list. So let's call this shopping.r.md. Not tags, always get that wrong when I go. Shopping.rmd. Okay, now first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this code directly and place it in an R block just to begin with, because we'll break it up as a second point. But first thing we'll do is we'll just make sure this runs and see what it's doing. Okay, so it's calculating how much money I owe the grocer based on my purchases and the prices which are held in this dictionary. So let's break this up into several blocks. So this script will calculate how much money I owe the grocer. First, we need to set the prices of the goods. And so our first block is we'll just create that initial dictionary which sets the prices of the goods. So that's set. Next, I will create a variable that will hold my purchases. Okay, so that's now got my purchases in this block. Finally, I will calculate how much I owe the grocer by looping over my purchases and summing up the cost. This is how much I owe the grocer. Okay, so we'll basically run this top cell, then the next cell, then the next one, and then finally at the bottom we have the last cell, and I owe the grocer 340. And let's now preview this as a HTML web page. Let's see what that does. It's processing, putting things together, and here we are, we're now opening this up as a web page, and there we are, we have the notebook beautifully rendered. Okay, so that's brought us now to the end. I close this. That's brought us now down to the end of this exercise. As I said, throughout this course, we will use our notebooks for all of the sections, and we'll use those to solve the problems. Do follow along with the examples, typing into your own notebooks to see how things work. And as I said, our Markdown notebooks are extremely powerful, and they actually support more than just R. You can put other languages into them as well, including Python, Fortran, Julia, etc. And you can generate books, websites, PowerPoint materials, etc. So for more information, there is an excellent book on R Markdown notebooks called R Markdown, the Definitive Guide, and it's linked to here. It's a free online book, which I do recommend that you read. Okay, now that you've finished part 1, please go on to the next video where you'll be able to do part 2.